Even the, like here in the consulate, people are
This
saying,
meeting is being recorded.
Excuse me.
even here in the consulate, people were saying, hey, why does it take so long in the United States to get the election results? And Quebec a month ago, we had them within like 15 seconds. What's
Yeah, but
going on?
they're not allowed to count any of the mail vote until the day of the election
Right.
for some
In
reason.
Brazil, we got the results in less than 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know there's over 100 court cases now.
Already? Well, okay.
Already before the election even was held, there was 100.
Well,
Yeah, the U.S. system is quite complicated, you know, and every location, every city has their own election. I just was like talking to my family in New Jersey, and you know, we were comparing not even how we voted, just the ballots that we had, and you know, and how different the system is from, like, I'm a resident of Michigan, and how different the ballots and the process is in, you know, like two places in the United States. Almost mind-boggling, right?
yeah.
In other ways, you know, like democracy is like such a treasure for all of us. You know, like we think it's normal, right? Certainly in Canada and the United States, we think it's the normal state that things will revert back to it. And in fact, it's a treasure that we have to take care of. We have to contribute. We have to put effort into growing it. You know, the fact that we've had robust democracy for so long is not the normal state of affairs. It's something that we should celebrate and treasure, with the knowledge that you know, not everyone has that ability to enjoy it, and if we don't take care of it, then it could go away, right?
Well said.
All right. Well, looks like I'm not sure where Tony is, unfortunately. Hopefully he can join us in the middle of the call. But perhaps with that statement, Matthew, you can tell us a little bit more about what your role is over in the consulate, and perhaps that will be an introduction to everyone as to what you can offer to people who are interested in entering the U.S. market.
Yeah, awesome. You know, first of all, a big thanks to McGill. You know, thanks to MIF, especially to Jinji and Mark. You know, I really appreciate the opportunity to join your program today, and to speak with your partners at McGill. It's institutions like McGill and also the consulate here in Montreal that underpin our democracy. I'm a big believer in the power of institutions, and so to be able to participate in an institution like the U.S. government and then to partner with McGill is really a treat. You know, it's like the dessert. You know, you guys have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and I get to jump in and be on TV, so to speak. So it's great to work with you guys. Before I was here in Montreal, I've only just arrived in Montreal in August. I was in Taiwan, which really was the first time I was you know, fully engaged in promoting investment into the United States. And of course, the big fish there was semiconductor investment. That's true, and so that you know, took up a lot of attention, and was really the thing that people thought about and noticed. However, a good part of my time was also thinking about how to help spinoffs and startups, you know, small companies that were you know, had technology from a university, and then they were trying to commercialize it. And I had a friend who worked in a VC, and he's like, "Man, you have all this access to startups here in Taiwan. You know, maybe you could use your interest in investing in the United States more generally to give some opportunities to the startups and to promote investment to certain places in the United States, and then give opportunities to U.S. venture capital firms. I mean, he was my friend, but he also had a profit motive in mind. So almost as a favor out of him, I was like, yeah, sure, okay, fine. Like I'll put together a program for startups in Taiwan. And man, it was such a success. The interest of the VCs to go to Taiwan and talk to the startups, and the interest of the startups to talk to the U.S. VCs was so robust. It was so energetic. It was really quite startling to me. It really was a favor to a guy I knew. I was like, all right, I don't know if it's a good idea, but it really worked. We had some good results, and the startups, we were able to go to the U.S. and they were able to seek partners. They were able to build relationships with the local U.S. governments, the U.S. economic development organizations. They were able to make connections to service providers that are necessary to succeed, like an incubator or IP lawyer or a tax accountant. That even if you're a successful business or a sophisticated person, it's hard to find those right people in Brooklyn or in Chicago or in LA or wherever you want to go, right? I mean, it seems like it won't be that hard to find the right lawyer or the right accountant. I mean, like those people exist and they're seeking clients. But in fact, to find the right person, has the right experience, the right partner, you often need some help. I'm sure some of you on this call have learned the hard way. So when I got here, I reached out to Mark, just gave him a cold call and said, hey, here's my idea. It might be interesting to find some startups or some spinoffs from McGill and try to connect them with the U.S. ecosystem in order to help them. So why is that? And it's a little different in the United States. We usually think about growing startups, growing in the domestic market. Like you're born in Silicon Valley or wherever, and then you try to grow in your home market. However, if I think for startups in Montreal or in Taiwan, it was certainly true. The investors wanted the startups to seek growth, and they wanted them to go to a big market. And the United States is definitely a big market. In Taiwan, they usually had to choose a path. Did they want to focus on growth? And usually it was China, Japan, or the United States. And then they would just focus on growing one of those places first. Of course, for me, as a representative of the U.S. government, I wanted them to grow in the United States. Like that is what I'm doing here at the consulate. I'm trying to help U.S. companies come here and sell into a supply chain for aerospace or for critical minerals or whatever. Or I'm trying to motivate Canadian companies to invest in the United States. So like this model, of course I want to do good, but also it's a part of my professional mandate with the U.S. government to try to help Canadian companies go to the United States, establish themselves, and to hire people there. When we were talking about this the other day, Mark said, Matthew, is this really a part of your mandate? Can you really promise that the resources of the U.S. government are going to help startups? And in some ways, it's aspirational. In some ways, it's real. And I can give two examples. We were supposed to have this conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I had to cancel it. So that's a good example of how it's aspirational. The Secretary of State came to Montreal, and I had to organize a couple of meetings for him, right? Okay, that's great. So I wasn't able to do this. So that's an example of how we wanted to put it down, we wanted to do it, but it was postponed. And then how is it real? Well, here we are talking, and we're discussing how we can try to help you. So that's one, is that the attention of the U.S. consulate is on what the participants of this call are trying to do. Second, is what kind of services will the U.S. government, and specifically for me, the U.S. Department of Commerce, provide? Let me give just a few examples. Today in Toronto, there's a large U.S. government investment promotion event, and this event has lawyers and accountants to talk about like the technical aspects of investing in the United States. How are taxes different? Just like elections are different in different places, taxes are different, and how you establish your company is different in different places. Compliance with U.S. laws and compliance with U.S. export controls is also a challenge, especially for companies that have sophisticated technology. Also at this event in Toronto, there's about 22 U.S. locations that are there that are trying to pitch their locations as the place where Canadian companies should go and invest. Places as diverse as Oakland County in Michigan, to Indiana, to Tennessee, to Phoenix, Arizona. Places that, while they're all in the United States, they look and feel, and the interface for companies trying to establish themselves is vastly different. Oakland County, strong automotive. It has a lot of graduates from the powerful engineering schools in Michigan. Northeast Indiana, strong manufacturing, quite rural. And then you have Phoenix, which is turning into a technology center. Each of them are going to be pretty different, and especially for companies that are small and are trying to grow, and especially for first-time founders or first-time entrepreneurs, if that's your experience. So the Department of Commerce has resources. We have a mandate, and then we have a network across the United States that we're meant to use to try to help startups like you. And we don't just want to help you. We want to help you grow, and we want to help you make money. We want to help you hire people in the United States. Or maybe I can just take a deep breath for a moment. I'm always one to keep talking, so maybe I can take a.
Thanks for that overview. And what I'll do now is I'll turn over to Mark, and maybe Mark, you're someone who has had experience as a Canadian company going into U.S. markets. And maybe at the time when you did so, I'm not sure if you had the access to the resources that Matthew's describing. Maybe you can pick out one or two examples where having someone like Matthew to go to might have been useful.
Yeah, I can give a couple of examples from my time in the chemical industry. One is we were a Canadian-based company, but we did want to move to the US. The head office did actually move to Pittsburgh. It's still there. So it went through all the stuff Matthew's talking about. It looked at Pittsburgh, New York, Philadelphia. So you need to know what's going on in each of those states and actually to the city. So Matthew is correct. It went down to the city level about where they were going to move the office. So that kind of stuff I wasn't involved in, but clearly who would know how to do that unless you literally have somebody there to walk you through it? So that's what we did. I can tell you more from the perspective of trying to get products to market. We had sales agents in the United States, which is good because they know the local practices a little bit, but not perfectly. So what you have in one place won't work somewhere else. So even in a company, to cover all of that is not feasible. You're just not going to do it. So if you do want to get that perspective, it would have been helpful to say, hey, we, let's say, have experience working in Illinois. We did a lot in Chicago, for example. But then we also wanted to do some stuff in California. We had nobody located in California. We had 2 people in Chicago. How's that going to be different? If we're going to be doing stuff there, what does that look like? So I think to Matthew's point, even if you're a decent sized company, let alone a startup, this is a pretty challenging thing to do. And I will actually ask Matthew to tell his story about from Taiwan when you had a very large company that you'd think would have resources to do this and couldn't do it. So maybe you want to give your example, Matthew, from your Taiwanese experience.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Taiwan, like I was working on a big semiconductor investment. You probably heard about it. And it was a big semiconductor investment in Arizona. and we were we went with them to do a site visits in the United States. It was amazing. So we chose 4 sites. I should say the company chose 4 sites, and this is a big company. You know, their revenues, north of $50 billion, right? And I was like, all right, well, I'll try to help you. And they said, all right, well, can you give us introductions to the economic development organizations in 4 sites, in 4 cities? And I was like, really? You need me? I'm glad to do that. Great. No problem. But really, like, you guys really need my help with that? They're like, yeah, like if you send that introduction, they're going to respond. So I was like, okay, good. I'm glad to do it. And wow, you can't believe how diverse the responses to those introductions were. I'll say that we visited one city, and they had one guy who was prepared. And so we walked into the city hall, and they were having a birthday party for some employee. We walked in with 10 guys from this company and me, and there was the birthday cake. And then there's the economic development guy. He's like, hey, Mr. Mayor, now I'd like you to meet this company. It's a big investment. And they were like, what's going on here? And they had Taiwan faces, and they were like, who are these Chinese people, and why are they in our city? And so, like, on a very basic level, I mean, wow, if I hadn't been there, then they might have gotten thrown out, In other ways, some of the sites we visited, I'd known the EDOs for a long time, for many years, and they put forth the effort to plan and to bring the engineering companies to prepare the sites, to bring the universities so that they could prepare ideas about labor. Having the EDOs that I'd already had a relationship with for a long time, they were prepared and they rolled out the red carpet. And the difference between getting the best energy of a city and a state so that they can give you their best site and they can prepare their best partners to explain what is going on, so they can prepare the permits office, they can prepare their partners who are providing financing, having everybody know, hey, this is important, this is real, this is a priority. That's night and day. And I can't speak for other people, right? I can't speak for other parts of the U.S. government, and I definitely cannot speak for other governments, whether it's a city or a state. But if we don't prepare the ground, if we don't give those introductions, then I feel pretty confident that your experience will be not as smooth. And it's I'm glad to do it because it's the right thing to do. But more importantly, I have both the privilege and the responsibility to try to help you as much as I can. And making an introduction is sort of a simple thing. Certainly for the consulate, it's a simple thing, but it can be very meaningful for even big companies, and it's going to be a lifeline for small companies.
Great.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's a great example. And maybe there's one thing that we talked about earlier this week when we did meet with Tony, and he talked about how in Canada, he had been preparing his business to sell to the various cancer centers across Canada. And they were very known entities to him. There were about 35 of them across the country at the time when he was starting his business. And then he turned to go to the States, where the situation is quite different and there's a lot of variety. So going to your example about the kind of diversity even in cities, can you comment a little bit maybe about the diversity within specific industries, for example, where the setups could be very, very different? You have experience in semiconductors. Can you comment on any of the other industries that maybe life science, for example, that might be interesting for some of our MIF teams?
Yeah, I mean, for medical devices, it's a great example of how manufacturers want to go to the United States. I'll just say that in Taiwan, they all wanted to go to the Bay Area. Like they if they didn't go to Stanford or Berkeley, then their uncle had, right? And so it was very natural for them. For them, even going to Southern California was a little different. It was not what they within their experience, even if they'd gone to a school somewhere else. And so bringing them to Texas that not just has a different regulatory system and a different tax system, but a very different business culture was very, very challenging. And for them to get insight into how do they choose a site, how do they interact with the permitting office, how do they think about incentives, and how do they get ongoing support for their investment was very challenging. And it's easy to get excited and say the U.S. government is going to solve problems, but in fact, like those are all local questions. Power, infrastructure, water, getting land, mitigating a brownfield. Even when there's federal rules or laws, often those rules or laws are administered by state or by city authorities. Like the pandemic was a great example of how we were trying to get companies that had various PPE to invest in the United States, and getting them connected with cities that welcomed foreign investment or that welcomed technology companies to go and become established. On the one hand, there's making an introduction, and then there's also getting the attention of someone to respond, and then getting plugged into a community that actually wants that. It's not enough to say, hey, I want to go and buy 10 acres, or I want to buy a desk at a WeWork in Houston, right? You have to find an organization or a locality that wants to work with you, and finding that for investors is something that I don't know, maybe it doesn't sound that hard, but I've seen so many companies struggle with that. And we can't choose the location. We can't choose the thing that startup companies want. But if you give us either the locations that you want, or if you give us your rubric of priorities, then we can help you find the right place or get a connection with those cities. And okay, if you have an idea, you want to go to Dallas or in New Orleans or Atlanta or whatever, then okay, that's pretty far down the road. But if you don't know that, then we can take your priorities. Hey, you want cheap land, you want low taxes, or maybe you don't care about low taxes. What you want is you want to go to where there's people that are like you, and there's an established incubator that you can step into, right? Like that's a pretty different set of priorities. And it's easy to see why one would be better than the other for a given company. And that's something that I can give to my colleagues in Washington, D.C., and then they can help narrow down the places that fit your priorities. And then I'm empowered to call those places and say, hey, look, I got this spinoff from McGill. They have real technology. They have experience as a founder or whatever it is. Please pay attention to them and welcome them when they visit you. So that's pretty good.
So perhaps from that point of view, you're almost offering some advice as well. It's not just information, but maybe guiding people to the right natural place for their business to be, or at least providing some nuanced options rather than just a list of city with requirements that fit their needs. But with that in mind, I was just going to turn over to Mark again. Mark, you have this great story of when you were trying to do business. I think it was in the South. I can't remember if it was Mississippi or where. And there's this hot day, and I think you ran into how the reality of doing business in the States is not always how it looks on paper. Maybe I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So we're now starting to get into things like finding locations and partners. So you really want to be careful about that. It's extremely different in the US than in Canada. So Tony Falco and I had talked about this. Our experiences were kind of similar. His were in life science, mine was in chemicals. But in dealing with companies in Canada, you were more likely to actually know them, or the degree of separation was like 1. So you knew the same people. So I went many times to companies in Toronto and ran trials there. I literally could walk into the door and they knew who I was. They let me in and I could almost run the machines, frankly. So that was what we kind of expected with some of our partners in the US. And again, we had some local sales reps, but not everywhere. So sometimes we'd find somebody who seemed like a good partner based on, hey, I heard through the grapevine, this is somebody you want to work with, but they weren't necessarily vetted. So I was making plastic parts, and we had a deal with a company in Springfield, Missouri, and they were to make parts. This was a brand new material. It was not available to anyone. There were some potential IP pitfalls with it. So we had told them very clearly, you need to make the parts and you either destroy them or you send them back to us. In Canada, everyone did that. That was very normal. They knew how to do it. We had this great relationship. And so we thought it would be the same. So I showed up to Springfield, Missouri in the middle of the summer wearing a shirt and tie, which was a mistake. It was about 90% humidity and 90 plus degrees Fahrenheit. And I walk into the customer and he said, I'm so glad you sent us that material. We were short a little bit of product, but now we can use yours. And these are going to go to Walmart today. So I was like, you can't do that. He goes, well, no, I'm going to send them. They're already sold. So I had to get on the phone with our lawyer at a different time zone and say, this product that we said was supposed to come back to us is now going on to retail. So what do? So we ended up figuring out that the chances of discovering it were kind of like a needle in a haystack, and we let it go. But it was a pretty good reminder that your local partner and where you choose to be, you have to know it very well. We navigated that pretty much blindly. Having somebody else help you with that, or again, choosing partners who have the same mindset as you do, as Matthew said, you want to go somewhere where there's people thinking the same way. We went somewhere where it was the wrong partner for what we were trying to do. There were people more established that we should have gone to. So it was a very strong lesson in when you go to somewhere like that, where you don't have boots on the ground, you probably have very few connections. You maybe don't even have the fact, oh, yeah, you and I both know the same person in this industry. You're going to have potential to get into a situation that is not what you planned for.
Yeah, and Ted, we'll get to your question in just a few minutes. I just wanted to ask Matthew, and you've touched on it earlier. It's a bit aspirational in what your offering is, in the sense that things come up and you sometimes have to rejig. But to Mark's point about being able to get that advice, can you tell the people, other people on the call today, what you could offer in terms of maybe not necessarily account management, but perhaps a somewhat deeper relationship, so that they know that they have someone who's maybe got their back to a certain extent when they want to go to the US? Maybe just talk a little bit about what you can offer.
Yeah, it's a great question of finding the right fit, right? And Tony the other day mentioned choose your first customer wisely. And one thing I always think about is if you assume everyone is acting in good faith, basically, like people are trying their best, right? But just having conversations between people where they understand, like Mark's partner in Springfield, Missouri, they were short on product, they were trying to do their best. They weren't trying to cheat anybody, right? They were acting in good faith. And so I see it all the time where companies or governments they're actually acting in good faith. Even when I was in China, interacting with my counterparts in the Chinese government, I have to say, I felt like they were acting in good faith almost all the time. And sometimes the relationship still doesn't work, or it's bumpy, or it's not as smooth as you wish it were, right? And so the one thing that the power of the institution of the US government can do is it can cause people to pause a little bit and say, hey, what's going on here? Who are we engaging? And do we want to stake our reputation on partnering with this person? Now, suddenly you might be scared of working with me, right? Because that's kind of a grandiose and thing to say. On the other hand, when you choose a partner and they step back and say, who are these people? What are they all about? Is McGill just an Irish name, or it means something, right? What's behind there, and what's going on? So working with the U.S. government is almost always slower than just doing something by yourself. But in my experience, it causes people to step back and consider, hey, what's happening here? Is this a relationship? Is this a conversation that makes sense? That makes sense for me? And like it's easy to get kind of like a little bit scary about that, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is, you want to find the right fit. You want to find the right location, because even if, like, let's say that you're a super mobile kind of company, like say you're a software company and you want to hire some programmers. In your head, you think it can happen from anywhere. It actually doesn't happen from anywhere. You know what I mean? You hire an employee, and it's probably most of you have moved in your life, moved houses at least in your life, and it like that doesn't happen. That happens with a measure of friction, even in the most optimal case, right? So as you choose to locate somewhere, what what I'm really offering is a little bit of seriousness from the other side and some thought from the U.S. government. Sometimes my part of the government, really what we offer is the ability to have a meeting. And so I'm always careful I try to undersell a little bit what we're doing. On the other hand, the ability to have a meeting with a principal is quite strong. If you come with the U.S. government, whatever level you are going to have that meeting is probably going to be moved up one, right? From like the program manager at the EDO up to the director of economic development, or from the salesperson up to the vice president for business development, and elevating that consideration to one level up is going to be worth a lot for you. It might mean that you get a no. It might mean that you have to go a little slower, but it also means that you will be saved from some inefficiencies, and you will probably gain some thoughtfulness. Like a great example is when the Secretary of State came to Montreal a couple of weeks ago. People were able to tell their stories at a level and with a platform that wouldn't normally be available to them. Now, I would like to say that in addition to the power of the U.S. government, that we can provide some actual intelligence, that we can bring some energy, that we can try to prepare you. And I think that that's true. Perhaps I'm still quite optimistic about the quality of people who are in government. So forgive me for that if you don't agree, because it's easy to not think that. But the people in the government, like they have talent, they have some education, and they will try to help you sincerely and in good faith. So in addition to bringing the institution and bringing attention to your company, what they're trying to do, then without a doubt, I can also try to give you advice about what you're trying to do and what makes sense for your company. And my colleagues, both here in the U.S. mission to Canada and also in the investment promotion office in Washington, D.C., we'll try to do the same. However, I would probably say that getting you in the door to the investment attraction offices and U.S. locations, that's the thing I'm most excited about offering to you. Now, the service providers, the people who can offer some venture capital to you to get you to, you already had your A round and you want to get a B round so you can expand to the United States. I think that's pretty valuable too. And it's probably going to be easier for you to find the right company to provide that funding if you let the Department of Commerce help you. If you have a good idea, you might be able to do it by yourself. I wouldn't want to say that we don't have a golden ticket, but we would make it easier for you. And then all of a sudden, okay, you're able to get a conversation with the investment attraction. You're able to get a conversation with the venture capital, and you've got some momentum that suddenly you're going to think, okay, I don't need to give the consulate a call now. you're making progress on your own.
Great. Okay, thank you. And before I turn it over to broader questions, and sorry, Ted, we'll get to yours for sure, I promise. I just wanted to bring Mark in for a last comment, and it echoes back to something that Tony, unfortunately, is not with us, had said about how McGill was such a help to his company, but in the end, it's not completely sufficient, especially when approaching things like entering the U.S. And so maybe, Mark, you can make a statement with your IMP hat on as to what we can do to help MIF teams and where those limits are and how that situates vis-a-vis what Matthew is describing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was quite serendipitous that Matthew and I connected. That was great because we get to a point where we know some VCs and can help you, for example. So everyone, of course, is looking for investment. We know the local ecosystem. They have a tendency to be small. They have a tendency to be pretty risk adverse. They have a tendency to go in with other people taking the lead. So not always the easiest ones to deal with. So just talking to Matthew, and we're going to try to expand on that hopefully in 2023, is get some of those VCs here for discussions. And Matthew brought up a great point, which I want to echo just because it's really important. You need to get in front of people who can make decisions. We often start with people we know, and especially as scientists, it's often at the scientific level, which is fantastic, but many of those people cannot make the business decisions. So you get a part of the way and they'll either get blocked or you've wasted your time, or now the delay is even longer. So I agree with Matthew. You want to get in as high as you can. You find a way to get there. And if it's through the consulate, what a great opportunity that is. So I really want to echo that. So that's why I think we can get you to a certain, we, the royal we of McGill, we can get you connections to people we know through alumni, through people who are interested in this space, but you're going to have to go to institutional investors who see thousands of these. So how do you get in there? Having somebody like Matt, I know these guys, they're always reaching out to me. Hey, you guys in the consulate see some cool stuff, send it my way. That's going to be worth way more than us trying to find some way to get in there. So I think what we can offer is exposure. We can try to connect you to maybe a broader network than you have. And then you take that broader network and then expand it again. And that's where someone like Matthew comes in. That's where somewhere like on the advisory boards for the teams, where you've got these people who've done it before, say, I'll open up my Rolodex to you. So really that's what you're trying to do. And when Tony was speaking to us, that's what he had to do by himself. So McGill took it to a certain place and he'd say, well, okay, I was in the clinic and I knew this doctor, I met at a conference, I'll start. And so it expands, but it's at a slower pace. So I think you want to leverage the opportunity of people like Matthew in the consulate to just get there faster and get there with a broader net than you can kind of cast on your own. So to me, we're trying to just add, it's like a buffet. We keep wanting to add more stuff because everyone needs something different. We know we don't have it all, but we know if we reach out to enough people, through that, you'll be able to get it. And I think something like the US consulate is just one great example of where we continue to try to do that. So hopefully I've answered it, Junji. I mean, I think the question that the way Tony phrased it was fantastic, but insufficient, the support. And I think that's absolutely correct because nobody can do everything. But by trying to get you to service providers that maybe you didn't know you had before, to consulates, to people in development offices, that hopefully gets you at least in the door. And then you guys can work on doing the rest.
Well, with that in mind, I think I'd like to, as we're getting to the end of the hour, sorry to cut you off there, Matthew, I'd love to open it up to questions. I know Ted's been waiting for a few minutes. He's one of our MIF companies. So maybe, Ted, go ahead. What can we help you with?
Okay, hi, I'm Ted Hill. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Physiobiometrics. We build devices that help people walk better. And we also have a series of products around that, as well as inroads in senior residences and private clinics and health charities where we are helping them walk better. And we have workshops and assessments in those places. So we're looking at both B2B2C and B2C. And we're right now just starting out in the senior residence. We have a few key clients, and we're not quite ready for B2C. So my question for you you started to talk about it near the end of your. I really appreciate all your insight and experience. That's great, but like we're kind of just starting out here, you know, and we're more at the point of. My question is, what is the minimum criteria to talk to you? Because we haven't even penetrated the markets here in Canada yet. We haven't got Series A funding yet. So at what point are we say, okay, we're ready now to go to the US? You know, I know it's different for each company, but there's got to be some minimum criteria before you say, okay, this company, we want to take you under our wing and start going with you. I don't think we're there yet, and we want to be there. But you know, it would be nice to have some check marks and goals to achieve to say, okay, we've done that. Now we think we're ready for the U.S. That's my
Matthew?
question.
I got two answers to that. The first one, I think is your organization ready to manage employees in the United States?
No.
Like to me, often the technology is the easiest part, right? And you know, I started my career working on China-related issues, and so I really got beat over the head seeing companies succeed or fail, not necessarily based on their technology, but how ready they were to manage an organization in a place that was different from home, you know, wherever home is, right? So that's one is, are you ready to do that? And what does that mean to be ready? One is, do you have the ambition to do that? Do you have the ability to do that? Do you have the talent in your organization to do that? Do you have the disposition to do that? Do you have the funding in place to do that? Do you have the ambition to grow there already? And it's like when you talk about your company in your mind, do you think, okay, success is, you know, growing in the United States with, you know, 100 engineers, with 10 engineers? Like, do you have that in your mind? Hey, in 3 years, I want to have this many engineers and I have this many sales. Like having that, you know, sharp in your head. You know, like what if you got $2, $5, or $10 million of funding at an early part? Like in your head, how would you spend that? Like in your mind, are you thinking, oh, I still need to develop my technology. I need to do that here in Canada. I need to hire engineers in the United States because they're going to be able to help me develop that. They're going to help me, you know, meet the regulatory requirements. You know, in your head, when you think about, oh, I need $100,000 the next 3 months, and the reason I need $100,000 is that I have to do X, Y, and Z. So, like when you think about that over 3 months, oh, I'm really struggling with, you know, how to spend money. The thing that's burning down the house for you is it in the United States? Yeah, so that, like when I think about companies like expanding to the United States or expanding overseas, even for on the exporting side, I always think about, is the organization ready? Is the problem that is really confronting you, is it internationally? Now, that's what I think. The thing that I've seen that is successful is far more varied. I talk to companies, you know, every day, and then there's like 3 big buckets. I think they're going to succeed, and they do. And then the second one is, there's no way, this is insane. Like this is like a charity, you know, like that doesn't make any sense at all. What in the world are they doing? Boom, they're successful. They grow up and rich. And I'm like, I'm such a schmo. I need to expand my mind. You know, I need to go back and read Dostoevsky again. Like, what's happening here? And then there's the other one where I think, oh, this is awesome. You know, like you got a couple like really responsible professors. Oh, they got great backing from some, you know, white shoe VC firm. Oh, this is going to be great. And it just like totally flops. You know, it's like those are 3 big buckets. So my first answer, which is the advice that I have for you, is your organization ready for it? The second answer is, I have no idea. Do what you want. See if it works.
Very honest response.
I appreciate the candid response. It's really about us right now, you know, in terms of focus and everything. It's about being as concrete and as possible, and it's hard not to see more than the next month ahead, right? And your talk is making us think towards a longer term strategy than what we have right now.
Yeah, and if I could just add something, Ted, it was sort of to the last question Junji asked about where do we go, where do we pass off the baton or whatever. The one piece now that I think the fund is sort of stable and will continue for years is I want to add more of that introductory to where you're doing seed, angel funding, et cetera, and get like a network going there. So it's just sort of easier to get those introductions. I think, again, someone like Matthew could probably help, but I'm working on that now. It's going a lot slower than I had hoped, frankly, but I can see within the next year or two having something where at least it would be simpler rather than I've got to knock on 20 doors. I'll get the 20 together and then you just go once. So I'm hoping to do that. And again, some of it may still be, to Matthew's point, the timing's off, but now at least you have a connection. They keep an eye on you, to reach out to them if something comes up. So I do think that's kind of the next sort of hole in the puzzle to fill. And it is hopefully within the next year or so, we'll have that. But I am going to follow up with Matthew around some of the investment part, because I think that was where we really started. Actually, he and I started in that vein and then realized there were other things as well that were good overlaps.
Yeah, we just don't want to be in the fourth bucket where we don't know what we're doing and get rejected out of hand. We want to be in at least one of those three buckets that Matthew was talking about.
Yeah, and maybe Matthew, again, I don't know what your time schedule looks like, and I assume it kind of varies quite dramatically as state visits suddenly happen and so forth. But isn't it even feasible for a group like TED's to approach you and maybe just sit down for half an hour and just say, well, give a bit more flesh on the bones in terms of their business idea, and maybe you can just make a few suggestions like, oh, you should head for this market, or you should really look at this place because they have a special focus on healthcare that really fits. Maybe you can just give them a few ideas. It doesn't have to be obviously at this call, but is that something that's totally out of place, or is that something that you'd be open to?
Anybody on this call that wants to send me an email and meet for coffee, boom, I would love it. Actually, I should be thanking you.
I would really appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's just let me put my email in. There's a chat function here, right?
Yeah, you go right ahead. Go right ahead. Thank you.
And
but
then
just to give people an idea what they can expect, and maybe they don't have to come with a slick presentation right away, but a conversation, a coffee, or something like that.
Yeah.
There it is. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah. And with that in mind, does anyone have any other questions? I don't see anyone else's hand up. Sorry if I missed it.
Lots more, but
Yeah.
Well, I did want to add that I was talking to a spinoff this morning for coffee. So Matthew, you and I have to do it because we haven't done that yet. And they were talking about going into the US to investors. And it was the same thing that I just mentioned. The ones here were not where they were ever going to really get great traction. And they're kind of at that same stage too. So it was like, well, your timing is very serendipitous because I'm talking to the trade consulate today. But definitely, you're not alone in this. And that's where I think just the fact Matthew's willing to do this is fantastic. Now, at least we know we have somebody to talk to. And that maybe starts something and plants a seed. And Matthew sees somebody who's like, oh, wait a sec. You're in seniors' residences. You've got all these people who have strokes or whatever and are recovering. Hey, I know someone who does something to help with that. And you never know where it goes, right?
Yeah. And actually, I did have a question, Matthew, maybe a little bit about how the internal workings of your function goes. Is it a case where like particular states might say they want to do a focus on, I don't know, AI or some new tech, and then they'll create a center or a hub, but they need companies to populate it. Would they then like start to reach out to people like yourself and say, you have to find us companies to move in here? Do you get these kind of bulletins or announcements from time to time? How does it work like that?
Yeah, I mean, like on a very basic level, even though I'm the government, like I have performance metrics that I have to meet.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm constantly seeking Canadian companies to invest in the United States. Like I see you as my client. Like I'm not like the imaginary functionary that's available every third Tuesday in January. I have performance metrics I have to meet. So that's one. Is I'm seeking companies in my mind. I'm thinking of them as clients. I'm a government worker, so it's not exactly the same, but I'm thinking about it that way. Two is I'm thinking about customers for my clients, and that would be locations where you want to invest. So I'm reaching out to locations in the United States. Hey, what do you guys want? What's important to you? What kind of companies do you want? Hey, what are your projects that could receive clients? Is that an incubator you're trying to fill?
Right.
Is that 1,000 acres for a mega project site? Is that proof of concept manufacturing? Is it semiconductor design companies that seek talent? So for me, I'm thinking about reaching out to EDOs, and then I'm trying to recruit them to come to Montreal to seek investors. And so sometimes that could be like, I'll say, hey, if you organize a breakfast, I'll try to deliver 7 startups to you. If you would like to have a seminar about why your location is better for taxes or better for medical or better for AI, let's have a seminar. You guys talk about why there's AI talent and how a Montreal AI startup could move to your location and hire people and then expand, use that as a gateway to expand sales. Or maybe it's a project where a Canadian company is going to go anyway, and their ecosystem partners have to go. And it's not a pitch at all. It's just, okay, we know you're going to invest, and let me bring some tax and compliance information to you so that you won't break the law. And when the big fish says you must come, you're able to come in a way that is as orderly and as efficient as possible. So that's not comprehensive, but those are things that happen inside my head every day.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that overview. We're at time now, so unless there's any other questions, I'll end the call. Again, as I say, this will be recorded. It'll be available online on our website. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Matthew, for your time. Thanks, Mark, for your experience. Thanks, Ted, for your questions. And thanks to everyone for attending. And Matthew put his information into the chat, so please reach out to him. We do have another, our next Lunch and Learn is going to be about finding investors. So Ted, you might want to be there for that as well. That's December 1st. We'll have people from the BDC and from other VCs. So that'll be hopefully and something else for you to really put into action.
Well, thanks all of you. Thanks Matthew, Mark, and Jinji.
Great. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Good seeing you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys.